All right, welcome back. Part two, we're ready to graph. All right, we talked about in class that number 9 was factorable. So since it's factorable, I am not going to worry about my P over Q list. Instead, I'm going to go straight to grouping. In the first set of parentheses, I can take out a 3x. And when I do that, I'm left with x minus 2. So when I go to my second set of parentheses, I also need an x minus 2. And to do that, I'll have to take a 6 out. And backtrack, I took out a 3x squared. So when I look at my final parentheses, one of them is x minus 2, which will result in 2 as an x-intercept, and the other one is 3x squared plus 6. And this one will result in my i's. And my y-intercept is negative 12 from the original equation. The odd power tells me that I'm going to have a line, a bumpy line, so I'm ready to graph my points. Don't forget to label them, and it's going to be positive sloped. So hopefully a little better than what I do. All right, on number 10, I do give you a clue, but it actually would probably just be faster to factor it. So with that, you don't need your P over Q list. Instead, I'm going to go straight to grouping. Now, if it helps, you might want to take a -1 out of your original equation because it always seems to be a little easier to factor with your leading term being positive. So if I do that, it will change this to x cubed plus 5x squared minus 9x and then minus 45. But remember, I'll be working with the original equation for my y-intercept, so that'll be 45. All right, let's go to the grouping. So I'm going to group the first two and the last two. In the first set of parentheses, I can take out an x squared and be left with x plus 5. So the second set of parentheses also needs to be x plus 5, and I'm taking a -9 out of those to get the x plus 5. So my final parentheses are x squared minus 9 and x plus 5. And when I look at what are my x-intercepts going to be, from the first set of parentheses, I get 3 and -3. And from the second set of parentheses, I get -5, which remember, that's the clue I gave you earlier. All right, ready to graph. I'm going to put my points on. Here's my y-intercept, 45. I've got 3 on the positive side and -3 and -5 on the other side. And when I graph, again, I got to remember I'm graphing the original equation, which if you go back, this is going to be a negative sloped line. So in the end, on the left, it's going up, and on the end, excuse me, in the end on the right, it's going to go down. And now I'm ready to connect. And there you go. There's number 10. A little different than some of the other ones that we've done. All right, let's go to number 11. Okay, number 11. So number 11's not factorable. So we already did in class, we listed the P over Q factors. Remember, the constant's P, the leading term is Q. So if I go for all the factors of P over Q, I'm going to have positive and negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. So even though I'm only writing 6 numbers, what I have to remember is that there's actually 12 rational zeros that I've written down. Um, and now I could guess and check my way through, but I'm actually going to go to my graphing calculator, and I've already typed it in, as you can see, and now I'm going to graph it. And when you look at it, it's hitting the x-intercept. It looks like at -3, looks like -2, 2, and 3. So what I'm going to do is write those down, -3, -2, 2, and 3. I'm going to go ahead and write them all down. Why not? And now I got to pick one of them to cheat with. So I think I'm going to try to cheat with, I'll just go with the positive number. So I'm going to make my synthetic division. I'm going to put the 2 in here. And then I'm going to take all my numbers. I've got all the x's, so I don't have to worry about anything being gone. And I should get 0 at the end. So I'm just going to go through the synthetic division, which at this point you guys should get. So I'm not going to talk here. All right, so it worked. I got 0 at the end. But, you know, I'm looking at the numbers, and I'm not seeing a pattern here that could be factorable because I'll have to use grouping. So I'm going to have to go and do this again. So I'm going to cheat with a different number. So I'll just use the -2 this time. But this time when I do synthetic division, I'm going to use the numbers that I ended up with, because this is really what I'm trying to factor at this point. All right, so 1, 4, 1, negative 6. Here we go. Yep, this one's factorable. All right, so I can put some x's with it. And now I'm going to factor. So factoring it, and my factors are going to be negative 1 and 3. And then now I'm able to prove the other ones. And I'm going to put these two parentheses in my list of factors. So moving back up. And I got to quickly move this stuff down to the correct line. Sorry about that. Bear with me here. So this negative 3, negative 2, 2, and 3 should be here. And now I'm going to go to my final parentheses. And they were, all right, I have to backtrack a little bit. I didn't look at my graph closely enough, so I'm going to put that back up. Um, over here, I just said 2 on the right side. I said 2 and 3. The x-intercepts are actually 1 and 2, so I'm going to quickly fix that instead. Now this makes more sense. Sorry about that. All right, so the parentheses I got at the bottom, the x plus negative 1 and x plus 3, will account for 2 of them. But then I need to remember that I did cheat with 2 and negative 2, so I'm going to add those parentheses in here as well. So I cheated with 2 to prove the other two. Now I'm ready to graph. My y-intercept is 12. I'm going to put my points on, and we actually already know how it graphs. It's going to be a very bumpy U, more like a W, so here it goes. And there is number 11. All right, number 12, I promise, not as many mistakes. Sorry about that, guys. All right, it's been a long day. All right, on number 12, this is one of your shortcuts that you had on the cheat sheet. This is a difference of cubes. So what I need to do is take the cubed root of both of these. So the cubed root of 27x cubed, 3x. The cubed root of 125, 5. And I don't need a factor list because, well, it's factorable. And now I'm going to come up with my parentheses. So I have the short set, which is going to be 3x minus 5. And then in the long set, I'll take the 3x, square it, both things, so I get 9x squared. And then the shortcut says to multiply the 3x and the 5, so I get 15x. And then the shortcut says to square the 5, so I get 25. And if you remember, it's only the short set of parentheses that gives you a x-intercept or a 0, and that one's 5/3. And from the longer set, you get your i's. And when I go back to my graph, my y-intercept is going to be negative 125, and now I'm ready to graph. Here's negative 125. Here's the 5/3, and now I'm going to graph. Just a slightly bumpy u. Okay? All right, there's number 12. Let's move on to 13. So 13, we're going to see, is this factorable? And we said no, it wasn't. So we are going to have to come up with our P over Q factor list, which luckily it's just going to be, here's my P, here's my Q. It's just going to be the factors of 6. And again, even though I wrote 4 numbers, there's actually 8 numbers. There's the positive and the negative version. All right, since it's not factorable, I'm going to put this in my graphing calculator, which I've already done. And it's graphed, and it's kind of hard to tell because it didn't graph for you guys. But it does hit the x-axis at negative 3 and at 1. And if I want to verify that, I can always just go to my table and check that out. So if you look at negative 3, there's a 0 for y. And if I go to 1, there's a 0 for y. So I'm going to write those two down because those are the only ones that clearly show up. And now I'm going to cheat with one of them. So I'll just start with the negative 3. So for the negative 3, I'm going to use 1, 2, negative 5, negative 4, and 6. We should end up with 0, so I'm going to go ahead and run through the synthetic division. And it looks like there might be something factorable here. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a shot. I'm going to put my x's in, and I'm going to group. From the first set of parentheses, I can take out an x squared, and I'm left with x minus 1. And I need an x minus 1 from the other set of parentheses, so I will be taking out a negative 2 to get that. And now I'm ready to put my final parentheses up in my answer spot. I'll have x squared minus 2 as one, and x minus 1 as the other. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. But I have to remember that I did cheat with negative 3, so I'm going to have to put those parentheses in. And the x minus 1 that you see here accounts for the 1 here. Now, I do need to set the x squared minus 2 equal to 0 and solve. And so when I do that, I'll end up taking the square root of 2, which is going to be 1.4 and negative 1.4. And now I'm ready to graph. I got my y-intercept of 6. I've got a negative 3. I've got a 1. I've got 1.4. And I've got negative 1.4. So a lot of points on here. Now that I'm ready to graph, I'm going to go back to the original shape. It's supposed to be a U, and we graphed it. We saw it on the calculator, so we should definitely get this right. And it's going through all the points. No bouncing off. There's my y-intercept filled in. All right. At this point, I'm going to stop this video, and I'll put the rest of the questions on a final and third video. So you can pick up for 14 and on.